All right, man, peace. So Kevin Durant recently was able to eclipse the 20,000 point mark. This has led to a discussion on where he ranks as an all-time NBA great. Of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Let's get into it, guys. So last night we witnessed the greatness of Kevin Durant joining the 20,000 point club. The 29-year-old became the second youngest player in NBA history behind LeBron James to reach 20,000 points, and one of just 5 players have ever done it before turning 30. So with that, I ask you, Stephen A., when it's all said and done, where will KD rank amongst the best players ever?
I think he could end up being top 5 all time. When I think about my top 5, it's obviously Magic and Michael. Tim Duncan's the greatest power forward ever. I put LeBron James at the small forward spot, although I'm reluctant to do so because of Larry Bird and the greatness of Larry Bird. But let's call it what it is. Larry Bird, over the course of 82 games, over the course of 48 minutes a night, was never the athlete, the phenomenal player that LeBron James is.
Well, I don't think that Stephen A. seems to understand the question. Molly's asking, where is Kevin Durant going to rank amongst all-time NBA players? She did not ask you, what is your all-time starting 5? So right there off the bat, your answer is null and void. Because Tim Duncan is not one of the top 5 greatest players to ever play. It just doesn't make any sense. Beyond that, if you're going to evaluate the Bird versus LeBron comparison, then you cannot even have Bird in your top 50 because he's not one of the top 50 greatest athletes to ever play basketball. This is why, it's tough to get into the Bird versus LeBron discussion, because once you start to use Bird's athleticism as a parameter or lack thereof, now suddenly it becomes more of an Olympic contest than a basketball contest. Basketball is a skill game. Now, what makes LeBron great is not his athleticism, it's the fact that he has a high skill level in combination with his athleticism. And that's why he's in the conversation with Bird. I'm on record as stating that you can throw Magic, Bird, and LeBron James's names into a bag, in my view, and whoever's name you pick out is who you pick out. Because I think that they're definitely all on the same level as far as impact. But Stephen A. does not understand the question clearly.
So I have to give LeBron James that edge at the small forward spot, and then I think about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Those are my top 5. So where would Kevin Durant ultimately be?
That's not your top 5, brother. That's your all-time starting lineup.
That's just a top 5 assembled. If I were to move anybody out, it would be Magic Johnson. Magic Johnson, the leader. Magic Johnson, the great point guard. Magic Johnson, the winner. The basketball savant. Still in all, from a gifted perspective, he was never the guy that Kevin Durant is.
Once again, the topic is not about who's the most gifted. The topic is, where will Durant rank all time? If the conversation is who's better or who's had a greater impact in his career, Magic Johnson or Kevin Durant at the end of Kevin Durant's career, then he's had a phenomenal second half of his career. Because right now, I would put KD in the top 30 all time. And that's coming off of his NBA Finals MVP performance last year. Magic Johnson is a 5-time world champion. 5 times. Probably the most impactful player in NBA history, or arguably the most impactful player in NBA history. Please keep in mind that he led the Lakers to a finals appearance under 3 different coaches. And in his last full season with the Lakers, he led them to the finals with Mike Dunleavy as coach and Vlade Divac at center. So if Stephen A. wants to make the conversation about who's more gifted or who's more athletic, then I think that he's doing his viewers a disservice.
Kevin Durant's a career 27-point per game scorer on better than 48% shooting. By the way, shooting 88% career-wise from the free throw line. And, oh, by the way, 38% from three-point range. This dude is 6'11", 7'6" wingspan. He's got a handle, the ball handling skills of a guard. He's improved his defense exponentially. And the fact that he's such a prolific scorer, I think at some point in time, if he wins championships to go along with everything else that's associated with his game, I think we will have to look and give strong consideration to him being top 5 all time.
If KD were to win 3 more championships, then he would arguably crack the top 10. He'd arguably crack the top 10. And I say that because even though there are players in my top 10 who have less championships than KD would have if he were to end his career with 4 per se, and I've already stated, I'm on record as stating that the top 10 players of all time have to be arguably the greatest players to ever play at their position and to have been unequivocally the leaders on their team. Whether people want to admit it or not, from the day that Tim Duncan came onto the Spurs team, he was the leader on that team. Michael Jordan, Magic, Wilt Chamberlain, Larry Bird, Bill Russell, those guys were all the leaders on their team. Shaq, Hakeem Olajuwon, LeBron. This is why these guys make my top 10. That's the reason why Isaiah Thomas is arguably in my top 10. Well, I would put him around somewhere between 11 and 15 because of his leadership that he brought to the Pistons. That team had no history of winning before he got there. Okay? So those are my criteria. And I have to penalize KD because he's not the unequivocal, he is not the he's not the clear leader of the Golden State Warriors. Now, he's come onto a team that has already won a championship, was a 73-win team, and he has formed a partnership with Steph Curry that I'm already on record as stating I believe will end up being probably the greatest partnership in NBA history. But we'll see. At the end of the day, though, KD is not the leader of the Golden State Warriors, and that is going to count against him when you're trying to add him onto all-time great lists, particularly the top 10. I grade everybody the same way. Like, I get a lot of these little silly dudes, I could tell you don't like LeBron, you don't like Kobe, you don't like this. Like, a lot of these guys like a bunch of damn chicks. I evaluate everyone the same way. So in order for me to put KD in the top 10, he would have to have become discernibly the leader of the Golden State Warriors and won multiple championships, and he's not. So Stephen A, to me, is trying to compensate for the deluge of insults that he levied against Kevin Durant last season so that he can come off as being quote-unquote fair.
Should win chips with that squad. Max?
I don't think there's a very good chance he can wind up in the top 5, and I don't even know about the top 10.
I agree.
And I think he has an outside shot of winding up in the top 10, and I say that because right now I'm not convinced he's the second best player at his position. If push comes to shove, I would take Kawhi Leonard.
Well, you know what? All that's cute, but Kawhi Leonard right now would not even be ranked in the top 50 all-time great NBA players. He has not done enough for a long enough time. So this is another guy who doesn't understand the question. I agree with his original premise, but his reasoning behind it lacks any form of rationale. How could you say that Kevin Durant's not going to be top 10 all-time because he's not even number 2 at his position today? That's arguable. I like Kawhi Leonard, but Kawhi has not even shown that his absence has had that great an effect on his own team. Kevin Durant, at the end of the day, has put up phenomenal numbers for 10 plus years. He's been one of the top defensive players in the NBA for the last 2 or 3 seasons as well. Right now, we're trying to prognosticate where he's going to be ranked at the end of his career. He's 29 years old. He has 20,000 points, a championship, a finals MVP, and a regular season MVP. This guy's had a 50, 40, 90 season. Kawhi Leonard has not done most of those things. He's been a finals MVP, but Kawhi has to show a lot more for him to be a factor in a discussion like this, which is about Kevin Durant.
Now, Kevin Durant's a fantastic defender. Kawhi Leonard is substantially better on defense. And on offense, Kevin Durant is the more talented player. But Kawhi is actually more efficient. I know a lot of that has to do with Greg Popovich, but it is what it is. You have a great coach, it turns you into a certain kind of player, you get credit for that.
Kevin Durant has shot over 50% multiple times, while taking more shots per game than Kawhi.
I know Kawhi's not as talented as Durant, but in terms of his impact on wins and losses, I'd probably start with Kawhi before I start with Durant.
Well, that seems to actually nullify your argument because the success that the Spurs have had without Kawhi would seem to convey that he's not as important to winning and losing as KD would be on a regular team. Now, when you're talking about the Golden State Warriors, you're talking about a team with 2 players that are in the top 3 players in the NBA. So it's hard to gauge how impactful KD would be on a team when you're looking at the fact that he's pretty much on one of the great teams of the last 20 to 30 years.
He's third best at his position right now, according to me. How's he going to wind up top 5 all time, any position? Let me tell you about the top 10. Michael Jordan is number 1. And if you include non-modern NBA, modern NBA really starts with the absorption of the ABA teams or the adoption of the three-point line. Somewhere.
I agree with that. The adoption of the three-point line came in 1979. You know, I always put the modern NBA as starting with Larry Bird and Magic Johnson being drafted, which was also 1979. Or I should say them starting their careers in the NBA, because Bird was drafted in 78. But, you know, it is what it is.
Somewhere right in that area, right? You have the modern NBA. But if you include the old-timers, after Michael Jordan and then Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, that's 2 right there, Bill Russell. By the way, look at Bill Russell's finals performances, everyone. I really think he's probably the second greatest player who ever lived.
You could argue that he's the greatest player that ever lived when you look at his success and his impact. Many people will say that he played on a stacked team. That's true, but they never won until he got there. And it took them, I believe, 4 or 5 years to win after he left. He retired in 69, and they won it again in 74. So that's 5 years after he retired was the gap between them winning it. And they never won it before he got there.
And Wilt Chamberlain. So you got one more spot in the top 5. Well, there's LeBron James. You mentioned Magic and Bird. There's Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal.
Kobe is not top 10. Sorry.
And then in that 10th spot, you want Hakeem, you want Tim Duncan. I'm not even getting into Dr. J, Jerry West, Elgin Baylor.
I agree. And that's the class that Kobe is in. He's with that Dr. J, Jerry West, Isaiah Thomas, Moses Malone. He's in that area, but he's not top 10.
That's top 10. Now, here's the thing, Stephen.
Did you say Dr. J and they'd be ahead of Kevin Durant?
Well,
Now look at Stephen A. once again disrespect the historical players and make an ass of himself. Dr. J was one of the most impactful players in the history of the NBA. And he was the leader on every team that he was on.
Well, here's the thing let me tell you about the difference between better and greater. Better, it's tough to argue against the most recent athlete. I mean, we know Kevin Durant's not better than Michael Jordan, but he might be better, he's better than Dr. J, right? But that's because things change over time. When you talk about greater, you're comparing someone to their contemporaries. Now,
Absolutely.
Dr. J was the alpha dog on an ABA team he's grabbing double-digit rebounds a game, leading the league in scoring, finals MVP in his prime.
And regular season MVPs. School him, Max.
You know how great Dr. J was? And he was inventing this stuff.
Absolutely. Or at least taking it to the next level from where Elgin Baylor and Connie Hawkins had brought it.
He gets credit for all that. Then he jumps to the NBA. He's still a great player, and he's clearly past his prime. And I'm not arguing even for Dr. J over Kevin Durant. I'm just pointing out how competitive it is in the top 10. I mentioned those other guys: Michael, LeBron, Kareem, Wilt, Bill Russell, Magic, Bird, Kobe. I know Durant's a lot more efficient than Kobe. Better defensive player, too, by the way. I'm not talking about one-on-one on the ball. I mean, overall defense, probably Durant over Kobe's almost...
Absolutely. 2 more championships in KD, I will probably put him right around the Kobe area. But he has to win 2 more. And if he can lead his team to 2 more, when I say lead, meaning win 2 more finals MVPs, I will put him around Kobe, maybe even slightly above Kobe. Because defensively, I will give it about a wash right now. Durant right now is playing defense better than Kobe ever played in his career. Kobe was at his peak a good defensive player. He was always overrated defensively, but at his peak he was a good defensive player. Right now, KD is doing things that are having him mentioned as Defensive Player of the Year. And offensively, he's just a far more proficient player than Kobe ever was. Kobe never shot 50% in a season. Durant has done it 4 times, and is going to do it again this season.
He's almost 7 feet tall, and he plays defense, and he's a more efficient scorer. But between you and me, Stephen A. Smith, who would you take? You're trying to win a championship. You want a leader, a killer. Who are you going to take?
Who?
Kobe Bryant or Kevin Durant? I'm taking Kobe.
I'm going to take Kobe in that situation. I understand.
Yeah, right now Kobe's above KD. There's no doubt about that. He's accomplished more, and mentally it's not even close. Kobe's above KD right now. Kobe's in that 11 to 15 range. I have KD right now in my top 30. But a couple more championships, and he's going to close that gap very quickly.
I understand that, but we're talking about at the end of Kevin Durant's career, what do we foresee? Now, I hear where you're coming from, but based on your logic, Michael Jordan shouldn't be ahead of Dr. J. I'm not speaking literally. I'm just talking about in terms of your logic.
Right.
Michael Jordan shouldn't be ahead of Dr. J. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar shouldn't be ahead of Bill Russell. Hell, Bill Russell shouldn't be ahead of George Mikan, for crying out loud, listening to you.
No, it's just that you were not listening. You heard him, but you weren't listening. He explicitly stated that he's not arguing for Dr. J above Kevin Durant. What he's stating is that in his view, Kevin Durant is going to be tough for him to even crack the top 10 because of the parameters of his career. And he was also considering the exploits of many of the historical players. That's all he was doing. He was not stating that Dr. J is greater or has a greater diversity of skills than a KD. So you're trying to create a straw man argument, sir.
The fact of the matter is that you take those things into consideration. You don't ignore the error. You definitely take the error into consideration. But you are allowed the luxury of looking at the modern day athlete, seeing the skill that he possesses, and also taking into account the fact that you probably learned something from a previous generation of players, but you've taken it to another level. For example, I remember the days of downtown. This is when I fell in love with the NBA. Watching downtown Freddie Brown with Dennis Johnson and Jack Sigma and with the Seattle Supersonics when they beat the Washington Wizards in the NBA Finals a year after losing to Wes Unseld, Elvin Hayes, and the crew. I remember that. And you can go from that to the Ricky Payeses and the Dale Ellises of the world. And then ultimately the Reggie Millers.
Yeah, but come on. Look, we don't need you to go through the timeline of the NBA. It's obvious that you really can't refute what Max has stated, so you're trying to show that you have some type of basketball knowledge. It's not necessary. You're just filling up airtime. Get to the point.
And the Ray Allens of the world came on board. But is it sacrilegious to say that Steph Curry is the greatest shooter I have ever seen? Of course not.
But
of course
point taken. I don't think by my logic it follows as you say that every previous generation was better. I'm not saying that. I'm saying you got to see where you fit in your era compared to where they fit in their era. I got Kevin Durant as the second or third best player today. Larry Bird in his prime was the best player in the world, period.
I agree with that. But I think that it's disputable that Kevin Durant is the third best player today. I can't put Kawhi over him. Not over a couple of seasons. Sorry. You have to do it in a big spot, and Kawhi has to lead the Spurs to a championship. At least KD can say that, he was able to lead his team to a championship. Now, Kawhi did win the MVP of the 2014 finals. That's all well and good. But let's be for real. That was really the honorary I guarded LeBron James award. It's the same award that Andre Iguodala won.
So that's what I'm saying. But let me show you what I mean. Make it clear about better or greater. Jesse Owens was, if you say better, that's the one sport there's no opinions. You can time it. This is the time. The lower the time, the faster you are, the better you are, period. Jesse Owens would be dusted by every single top 10 sprinter in the world today. In other words,
That's true, but one would also have to factor in the different forms of training today, as well as the different drugs that athletes are using today. Let's be for real. But Max certainly makes a fair point.
Literally,
no other words, we get it.
Every top 10 sprinter is better than Jesse Owens. But when we say who's the greatest track and field, we know what we mean. We're saying greater. You're saying that the 8th best track and sprinter in the world today is greater than Jesse Owens? No one's going to try and argue that. So yes, Kevin Durant is going to be better than some of the guys on the list. But greater, I wouldn't argue. And even if you want to get to better, if we're choosing up teams, and I love Durant. We're splitting hairs. He's a top 20 player for sure, right? Maybe top 10, I think, eventually. Kobe or Durant? Give me Kobe. Shaq or Durant? Give me Shaq.
Well, Shaq is the most dominant player of the last, 45 years.
Wilt or Durant? Give me Wilt. Let alone Kareem and Michael. And I'll take LeBron right now, so he ain't going to be ahead of LeBron. I don't see how he cracks the top 5.
Well, listen, I'm saying to use this. If you're a career 27-point-per-game scorer, you shoot. Listen, Kevin Durant has shot.
Yeah, but none of that shit has anything to do with the topic, Stephen A. Like, bro, did you forget to snort your line of coke this morning? Was your coffee not strong enough? Okay, he's averaging 27 a game for his career. But that's not the question, brother. If that's the case, then we could throw Alex English and George Gervin and all them other guys in the top 5 all time.
Better than 50% from the field the last 4 seasons. He's shooting better than 50% from the field right now. He's a career 88% shooter from the free throw line. The level of efficiency that you see from this guy. The knock against Kevin Durant was when he was basically, subjected to second-tier status, even though he was the best player on the team, to Russell Westbrook, because Russell Westbrook was that alpha dog for the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Yeah, and he controlled the basketball and stopped KD from getting it. And they were not running a real offense. They were playing playground basketball. That's why Kevin Durant was intelligent to leave.
Who took more shots than Kevin Durant in 3 of the 8 seasons that they played together. You can take those things into consideration. You can look at the absence of leadership. You can look at what I have been on the record saying was the weakest move by a superstar ever, by his willingness to go to Golden State. But there is no denying.
These guys are so funny. Someone should tell Stephen A., it's weak for you to work for the #1 sports network. Even though you know that you're going to get the most exposure, you should go to a network that will provide less exposure and build them up so that you're not weak like Kevin Durant.
The greatness of this guy in this day and age, when the NBA has elevated itself to being the #1 global brand, as far as I'm concerned,
yes,
in the world of sports, you're looking at a guy in Kevin Durant that's the second best player in the world.
The #1 global brand is FIFA. It's not the NBA. The NBA is the #1 global sports brand from America.
The second best player in the world. And so if we want to knock it, let's say the one thing that you could knock that could make you have a hiccup about today's player is the fact that the rules have changed to such a degree where you can get called for a foul for having bad breath. If you touch somebody, it's a foul. But
look. And a lot of the younger cats, they get frustrated by dudes like Stephen A. Smith, and you have a lot of guys on the internet who over-exaggerate the physicality of the 80s. Was the 80s a little bit more physical? Yeah, it was, but conversely, the athletes are better today. So they almost have to concentrate a little bit more on fouling because the athletes today are a little bit quicker. Their kinetic chain operates with a higher level of proficiency than the athletes of the 80s. Now, in the 90s, you had a lot of the bully ball and the weightlifter era, I call it. Where everybody was bench pressing 350 and getting on the court and preparing for football. That was the most physical era in the NBA, but they still called hand checking. They still called fouls and things of that nature, just that it looked more physical because your 4-man couldn't shoot farther than from 15 feet out. His job was to clog the lane and to hit somebody who drove to the basket. But fouls have been fouls in every era, and the flagrant foul call has been around since 1990. It's not anything new.
But if you're going to get on Kevin Durant about that, then you got to get on LeBron about it too.
Sure, but don't you think that, you're the one who argued...
The difference is that LeBron actually led his team to all those championships, and everywhere LeBron has gone, he's been the leader. That's why I judge him a little bit differently. Okay? And, back in regards to the NBA, yes, they have made a greater effort to make the style of play a little bit smoother. But fouls have pretty much been fouls. And they have paid much more attention to hand checking in the last, I would say, 12, 13 years. They brought in the zone defense, which a lot of teams don't even play that much zone because the shooting right now is so good that playing zone actually hurts. So, a lot of it is just much ado about nothing. Basketball is basketball.
Argues basically from the position, and we know what you mean, and I wish it wasn't this way, actually. I think the world would be more interesting if it wasn't. But there's some kind of, you mentioned alpha or leadership thing in Durant that he's not looking for. He's admitted it publicly. I don't want to be that's not who I am. That's fine. But without that, when push comes to shove in the end, because you're right. And by the way, Paul Pierce is right. You can argue Kevin Durant as a scorer is in the conversation with Michael Jordan, and I think he is. The greatest scorers in the history of basketball, Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Kevin Durant. And I'm not sure which order. Those are the greatest scorers. He's right there, and he's a great defensive player.
I agree.
So why isn't he rated higher, Max, or those who don't have him higher, as you have him? because I do think that thing that you mentioned that's missing when you're splitting hairs and comparing him to Kobe Bryant and Larry Bird, it makes a difference. Also, in terms of where you place in your own era, Larry Bird won 3 consecutive MVPs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, it's so funny. You get a lot of these guys that come in the comments, oh, you like Larry Bird, why you like a white man for it? Look, dude. The problem with a lot of the internet revolutionaries is that they don't know when the conversation pertaining to race is pertinent and relevant and when it's not. When I'm evaluating sports, it's about your proficiency on the court or on the field. I'm not concerned with racial dynamics and things of that nature in regards to evaluating athletes on the court or on the field. And a lot of these guys, these internet revolutionaries, they want to talk all that shit. They're the same guys. I say this all the time. They go to work on Monday and they see the white boy by the water cooler and they want to talk to them about the game on Sunday. They want to come on the internet and try to act like they Khalid Muhammad. Motherfucker, you're not fooling me. All right? So miss me with all the low-level dumb shit.
As a guy who was the best player on and the leader on 3 championship teams. The MVPs didn't line up with all the championships, but both those things are true. KD hadn't done that.
Well, Max, here's the thing. Here's what KD has done. The career 27 points per game. The man has only shot 20 or more times per game twice in his career. He's a career 18 shots per game person, okay? Most of those stars that you're talking about can't say that. And by the way, taking into that logic, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, is he not universally recognized as one of the greatest players ever? You know, arguably top 5. What was Kareem?
Arguably top 5. Yo, what the hell is Stephen A. smoking? Let me find out he was in California for the last week enjoying the legalization of recreational marijuana. What the hell is this guy talking about? Even Max Kellerman is making an incredulous face. Arguably top 5. What are you talking about, man?
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. What was Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? A scorer.
Yeah.
A scorer. I mean, Kareem, don't get me wrong, he could play defense, but Kareem Abdul-Jabbar wasn't an all-world defender for many of those seasons that he was in the NBA. He had the one unstoppable move in the history of the sport, which was the sky hook, and he is the all-time leading scorer.
There's a difference. Kareem had the kind of influence on a game. And this is what I mean by that missing. I don't want to take shots at Durant and say, oh, there's something missing. It's that what's added to the other guys. Let's look at it like that. They have a dimension there. I'm not going to knock KD for being who he is. He's one of the greatest players ever. No doubt about it. I'm not going to knock him. But Kareem
easily top 10.
Kareem had the kind of, I don't know about easily.
Yeah, come on. He's not easily top 10, Stephen A. What are you talking about, man? But you know what? Let me say this. That's based off of Stephen A. saying he's going to kick Magic out of the top 10 for Kevin Durant. Somebody needs to check what's in Stephen A.'s water.
Kareem had the kind of influence on a game where every time he had a squad, they won a championship. Like, you put him with Oscar Robertson, he's going to win a championship. You put him with Magic Johnson, he's going to win a championship. I know not every single year, but he did that. Kevin Durant was on some great teams early in his career. I know there was an injury here, an injury there. They were young. They were learning to play together. But it wasn't until he joined the greatest team since the Bulls, since the Michael Jordan Bulls, the most unstoppable force in basketball, the Golden State Warriors. It wasn't until he joined that team that he won a championship.
Yeah, well, you know what? KD was never on a great team in OKC. He was on a very, very talented team. It's a big difference. Great teams know how to execute in clutch moments. They never showed that they could execute in clutch moments against top-level teams. They were never a great team. Great teams win championships. They were very talented. That's why I liken them unto the early 90s Portland Trailblazers. Trailblazers could get to the mountaintop, but they could never put their flag down. Because something always would happen. They had poor execution down the stretch. They didn't get high-level cerebral point guard play from Terry Porter, who was talented, but he was not a top-notch executor. And Clyde Drexler oftentimes would be confronted with a player in the finals who was just better than him. In 1990, Isaiah Thomas was better than him. In 91, Magic Johnson was better than him. In 92, Michael Jordan was better than him. It happens. But KD was intelligent enough to understand that he would not be able to ascend to the level of mastery until he got to Golden State because they understood basketball. It wasn't playground basketball in Golden State like it was in OKC.
Let me tell you this.
I don't think you can compare him to Kareem.
But Max, let me say this on the record. This is one of the reasons that I was so ticked off about Kevin Durant deciding to go to Golden State. It wasn't just that it shifted the balance of power. I thought there was various teams that he could have went to other than Golden State, and they still would have won the title. I think had he gone to San Antonio, they would have won the title.
So it would have been better for him to go to San Antonio and team up with Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge and Greg Popovich at coach than to team up with Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green, all because they happened to allow Golden State to come back from down 3-1. Either way, he would have been teaming up with a better team in order to ease his chances of winning a championship. Come on, man.
I think had he gone to the Clippers with CP3, they would have won the title.
No, they wouldn't have won a title in LA. The chemistry was too poor there. The players don't like the coach, and their system would not have been. They would not have been able to execute down the stretch of close games. CP3, he gets a little too tense, and so does KD. They need, they need a coach. They would have needed a coach there with an offensive system that they could revert to. See, when Golden State, when they have moments of tenseness, Steve Kerr has them execute their offense. Make sure that they run back screens, get open looks. Teams like the Clippers and OKC, when they get in intense moments, they just want to go one-on-one.
I'll take it a step further, Max Kellerman. I think if Kevin Durant had gone to Miami, they could have beat Cleveland and won the chip. That's how I feel about Kevin.
Well, how could you say that when you're the one who's on record as stating that Kevin Durant didn't sign with the Eastern Conference team because he was scared of facing LeBron before the finals? So you're just talking. The reason why you wanted him to go to Miami is because it would have gave you more of an opportunity to go down to Miami to cover the team if Kevin Durant was there. So you could go down there and meet up with some of them big booty Cuban escorts, allegedly.
I draw the line there. I'll go with you with the others. Probably, certainly San Antonio. Maybe
we'll
the Clippers. I'm drawing the line at Miami.
We'll talk about Miami a little bit later on in the show, along with them damn Washington Wizards, because I got some stuff on my mind about them too. But Kevin Durant, I'm telling you, Kevin Durant, a lot of teams would have won a title.
KD would be a perfect addition on any team that ever was, right? But he is the super complementary piece. He is not the engine that makes a championship team go.
Some have said that about LeBron.
Golden State.
Some have said that about LeBron.
LeBron that's what LeBron is. He is the engine.
No.
Well, look, I give LeBron credit for being the lead guy on all of his championship teams, but I remember Skip Bayless tried to make the point that Kyrie Irving was the leader of their championship team in 2016. Who knows? In 10 years, we may look back and say, if Kyrie's got 3 more titles with Boston, we may look back and say, hey, we had to reevaluate that championship they won in 2016. Maybe we're not giving Kyrie enough credit.
Whether or not he's a finisher, whether or not he needs shooters around him, but he's the engine that makes it go.
Stop that nonsense. To see your ear infection that you got. You must love hearing yourself talk, even with the ear infection. Don't give me the dichotomy between it's the engine. He may not be the finisher. Excuse me. When it comes to finishing, that is the damn engine. Okay, that has a lot to do with the engine. A lot to do. Not the engine, but it has a lot to do with how that engine percolates.
Well, I agree with that. There's definitely a correlation between finishing in big moments and being considered the lead guy. All right. And that's why LeBron showed a great deal of maturity when he was able to finish off the Spurs in Game 7.
Who's the engine on Golden State? Who's the engine on Golden State? You know what I mean.
Listen, it's Steph Curry. I'm talking about Steph Curry's a bad boy. They don't win the chip last year without Kevin Durant.
I agree. That's why I call their relationship a partnership. There is no discernible lead guy on Golden State. And I do give KD the credit for being the finisher and the engine in their finals matchup with Cleveland. And that's why I say that if he's able to win 2 more championships in the same manner, in the same dominating fashion, I got to put him in my top 15. Somewhere in there.
Right?
Of course, he put him over the top. As I said, he's the greatest ever complimentary.
So let me ask you this question. If they took Kevin Durant out right now, would they win the chip this year?
They'd be maybe.
No, they wouldn't. No, they wouldn't.
Right in the mid.
I agree with Max. They would be competitive. You're talking about a team in Golden State that has won championships without, or won a championship without Kevin Durant.
No, they wouldn't. They won one without Durant. Listen. If they didn't have Kevin Durant now, they wouldn't come out the West.
Hold on. Well, maybe because of the Houston Rockets. We're going to talk about the Rockets later in the show.
Okay.
Yes.
The Rockets have yet to prove that they can execute in the playoffs. So Stephen A. is just talking. The referendum is still out on Chris Paul and what's my man name, James Harden. They have to show that they're not going to freeze up and lock up in big moments.
Because of this arms race, the Rockets are squad up and playing when everyone's healthy incredibly. Yes, they may need Durant to get over the Rockets. The reason the Rockets are that good is because they added Durant. Everyone up the ante. But they won a championship before Durant got there. Steph is the engine on that team. LeBron's the engine on his team. Larry Bird, Magic Johnson were the engines on their team.
The championship they won without Kevin Durant was when Kevin Love and Kyrie were out.
Okay, that's cool. But you were not making that point when you were trying to say that the reason why Golden State lost in 2016 was because of their injuries and that they were up 3-1. You can't have it both ways, Stephen A. At the end of the day, they won the chip in 2015. They came out of nowhere. No one expected them to even be there. In 2016, they suffered a series of injuries, and they allowed Cleveland to come back from down 3-1. So it's even Steven. It's 1-1. It is what it is.
That's true. That's right.
You.
And by the way, that was a little tougher than it needed to be.
Just a little detail. You're just going to ignore that, right?
But
Kevin Love and Kyrie Irving out. Just going to ignore that.
Well, has Kevin Love shown himself to be some dominant performer in the finals where he was going to make a big difference? If Kevin Love had played, who knows? It might have been a damn sweep because he couldn't guard anybody.
They won 73 games and lost to the Cavs in 7 games by the skin of their teeth with Steph Curry. KD never came that close to a championship. Steph Curry did. And right now, Steph is still what makes the team go. KD puts him over the top. KD is the greatest put-you-over-the-top player
There
ever.
is something to be said for learning how...
Well, that's debatable if KD is the greatest put-you-over-the-top player ever. If you remember, Moses Malone came to the Sixers in 1982 for the 82-83 season, and he put them over the top. So it's debatable if KD's the greatest over-the-top player ever.
How to win.
And then also you have Shaq, who went to the Heat in 2004. And they arguably would have went to the finals in the 05 postseason had Dwayne Wade not gotten hurt in the conference finals. So, I mean, it's debatable.
What I'm saying is once you're a champion and you know what it takes, they learned how to win. But how did they learn how to win? Because they had that bye first go round when Kyrie and Kevin Love went down.
We agree about this, Stephen A. You see it my way. You're just not going to admit it. Okay. KD is the ultimate complementary player.
And look, I'm going to end it with that because they're pretty much talking in circles. As in regards to where Kevin Durant ranks right now for me, I have him in my top 30. If he's able to win 2 more championships, especially if he's able to win 2 more finals MVPs, I'll put him in that area. And probably right outside the top 10, maybe 11 or 12, somewhere around there. Around that Isaiah Thomas, Moses Malone, Kobe area. But anyway, peace.